Um, I'm not in the role of a human rights advocate. I'm certainly not a human rights lawyer. And um, my role is more, I guess you could say, as a political analyst and a political activist in the sense that our organization is dedicated to ending the Israeli system. In other words, in some ways, it's a little bit hard for me to relate. I mean, it's very important, our division of labor. It is very important to highlight this law and what's behind it and try to address it and all the other abuses that Milena and others have mentioned. But in a sense, it's like tinkering with the system. We're trying to reform the system. It's built into the system. These forms of degradation, of dehumanization, of violence, of genocide, of extrajudicial killings, judicial killings. I mean, they're not things that you can really um, dismantle, or you can oppose one or the other and somehow make the system respectful of human rights or safe for Palestinians, or it's the entire system that has to fall. And the law that's been suggested falls into the logic of settler colonialism. It makes sense. Um, so it isn't like some bad, evil initiative that's right wing, extreme right wing people like Ben Gvir are pushing through the parliament. I mean, you might have that in terms of the immediate event, what exactly happened in the committee and the vote and everything else. But in fact, it really is an expression, an inevitable expression of the whole way the settler colonial system works of Zionism. And I think we have to place it within the context that we're in now, because, as Milena said, and so on, it's happening at this moment, maybe from October 2023, maybe before, but a lot of these things are happening. The genocide in Gaza, the holding of hostage and abusing something like 10,000 Palestinians in Israeli prisons today. The extrajudicial killings, especially in the West Bank, unleashing the settler violence, the dehumanization that we heard in this testimony about all of these things make sense uh, because the moment we're at right now in the settler colonial process, it's lasted 130 years now, is in the stage of pacification. In other words, the final stage is normalization. That's how settler colonialism wins. It's not a victory. It's not a decisive military event. It's normalization. You simply normalize what's existing. And this is the basis of the Abraham Accords that the Arab states, even Kazakhstan, joined the other day. This is really where we're going. And normalization is the closure. It's not negotiations. It has nothing to do with Palestinians. It's basically the acceptance of Israeli settler colonialism, Israel on 78% of Palestine, and the entire settler enterprise as an accepted fact, accepted by the international community, the Arab states, the United States, de facto, probably everybody else, pretty much. And but in order to achieve normalization, and I think this is what's important, there has to be industrial quiet. There can't be normalization, especially given the opinion in the Arab streets. There can't be normalization as long as there's resistance. Because normalization means normalization, that we're Kansas. We're walking around doing our everyday lives. Everything is normal. There's no issues here. The minute, Netanyahu talks about total victory in Gaza, and everybody laughs at him. Even the army laughs and says, what? There's no such thing as total victory. What do you want? The last Hamas person that thinks about liberation to be killed? You want to go to that level? And the answer is yes. Netanyahu understands what has to happen. If there's one Hamas fighter that gets up on the ruins of Gaza with a rifle and is able to shoot an Israeli soldier, that's too much resistance. That prevents the whole process of normalization from going on. And so you've got all these different forms of extreme repression and killing today in order not only to defeat Hamas militarily, which is what the Israeli army has argued we should be out of Gaza for the last year and a half because we've already achieved our military ends. No, but what Netanyahu knows is we haven't achieved the level of quiet that's necessary for the normalization process. And so you get killings, the genocide, of course, which is built into settler-colonialism. But you've got all the different other kinds of killings we're talking about, including, in the West Bank with the settler violence and so on. You have all of that. But the law about the death penalty, the way they're justifying it is it's not revenge and it's not even punishment, it's deterrence. Now, put deterrence within the framework, within the context of pacification. And the idea that, one Hamas soldier standing up is too much resistance. Well, even Palestinians that are Palestinians that still even express some national idea about a Palestine, that's too much. That's too much resistance as well. And so the deterrence means to absolutely shut down, to create despair. And this was an idea that Zev Jabotinsky, the right-wing revisionist Zionist leader, had in 1923 when he wrote this famous essay, The Iron Wall. The only way we're going to beat the Arabs, he said, is by despair, by making them understand that there will never be an Arab Palestine anymore. And that, I think, is what's built into this law. And this then relates to this whole process of pacification, break. And one of the things she asked him was, why the dehumanization of the Jews coming into the camp? Why, all right, you bring them in on trains, you have the ovens, why not march them to the ovens or the gas chambers or whatever and kill them? Or those who want you go to work. Why the suffering on the train? Why shave their heads? Why strip them? Why all the degradation on the way to the gas chambers? And he said that had to be done not because they were trying to punish the Jews or humiliate the Jews, because if the dehumanization hadn't happened, the German soldiers or the Germans manning the camps, manning the ovens couldn't have done this to other human beings. They had to make them unhuman so that the people shaving the heads of the Holocaust victims wouldn't feel they're doing this to other human beings. And I think that's where Israel is going with these laws and with its policies towards pacification. I think we're trying to create a situation in which Palestinians are so dehumanized, they're either terrorists, and this also, of course, casts them as terrorists, and I think the rapes certainly reflect this. They become such objects that they're no longer subjects. They're no longer people we have to deal with. No longer a people. The woman of the testimony said that. I've been robbed of my whole humanity, my soul, my voice. And I think that's precisely the idea. And if you then enlarge that into the wider political picture of this normalization process and pacification and genocide, I think you begin to understand the logic. And so what I'm saying is it's important that we highlight these outrages, that we try to fight them and so on. The human rights organizations do great work. But in the end, we can't dismantle and decolonize the situation law by law and step by. You can't have a campaign for everything. And we have to begin to do some root canal work, attack the system, the settler-colonial system that creates the logic by which these laws come about. Otherwise, we're gonna end up just, fighting, an ever-ending battle, and Israel is going to progress.